In this episode with Raunak Shah, who is a podcast host, we talk about podcasting. This episode essentially serves as a guide to podcasting. And we talk about some really important elements that a podcast host needs to be aware of. And all of Raunak's links will be in the description. Definitely leave a like, share, and comment. That will make me very happy. So, Raunak, let's just start with the first most important element when it comes to podcasting, which is communication skills. So, how did you start getting more confident in your speaking skills?
Okay. So first and foremost, we need to make a very, very important distinction, and this becomes particularly important for podcasting, right? Communication skills is different, and conversation skills are different. They overlap. They have a lot of overlap between the two. There are a lot of similarities between them, but they are fundamentally different. So first and foremost, don't confuse them, right? To be a good podcaster, you need to have both those skills. To be a good human being, you don't necessarily need to have very good conversation skills. You need to have good communication skills, right? So first and foremost, you obviously start communication skills, then you extend that into your conversation skills. Now, just to keep it very simple so everyone can understand, your communication skills is dependent on how well you can express yourself. I am thinking something and I want to say it. What is the best way that I can use language to express my idea or my thought? When it comes to conversations, it's way more complicated because now it's dynamic, right? Now I have to not only I don't have to only worry about expressing my idea. I have to express it in a way that you understand it. I have to express it in a way. I have to express it in a way that you might want to even continue the conversation. Then I also have to understand what you're saying, make you feel that I have understood what you're saying, and then eventually I have to make sure that even I continue the conversation, right? And when you top that off with another things like a podcast, right? I mean, we aren't just two people having a beer, right? That's a normal conversation. This is a podcast. That means we expect people to listen to it, ideally for the entire length of it, right? Here now it's even more complicated because there's a third entity. There is no visible audience right now, but there is an audience, right, who's listening to us. So you have to worry about their attention span, their interest level, their intelligence level, and what they want to listen to, and how they want to listen to it, right? So this is like a gradation that I would say. So yes, you have to start by communication skills. I've already given a lot of advice on how to build your communication skills already on my YouTube channel, so you can check that out for detail. But most importantly, I think it's a function of three things. One is you have to learn how to articulate yourself, and writing helps in that. Learn how to express your thoughts and ideas in language, which is what we don't learn. A lot of people don't know, but we think in pictures, we don't think in words, right? We think in images.
Yep.
Then we convert that image into words, which is language, right? So that is articulation. Second is your pronunciation. That depends on your language. Now, if we were doing this in Malayalam or if we were doing this in Punjabi, I would be a very bad communicator because I don't know the language, right? So I don't know how to express myself. Even if I was doing it in a language that I know but I'm not comfortable in, I won't be a good communicator because I had not heard the words before. So I can't even my expressions of the words are not good enough, right? So this is your language exposure, which means if you want to do a podcast in English, you need to have enough number of conversations in English. If you want to be a good English communicator, you need to read a lot of English, you need to listen to a lot of English. And third is enunciation, which is how much breath you exhale into each word, right? And if you don't enunciate well, then you mumble. And this, if you want to know whether you are a mumbler or whether you're a bad enunciator, people who are bad enunciators, the other person often asks you to repeat yourself, right? And it's very insulting when that happens, but it happens to a lot of us. So if someone is asking you to repeat yourself, most likely you're not enunciating yourself well enough. So these are just three frameworks that you need to keep in mind to improve your communication: articulation, pronunciation, and enunciation. I hope
That
that
is some
sets
really
both the
nice
points.
distinction right there, honestly. For me, I'll tell you my story. Okay, so it's honestly like for me, it's just through public speaking that I've learned to talk to people. Okay, my
Okay.
very first experience with public speaking was back in sixth grade when we were
Okay.
asked to give out some poems. Okay, on the stage,
Hmm.
and I went on the
Hmm.
stage. The mic dropped, and I couldn't speak. I was like just stuck there. So I thought I will never ever do this again. I don't want to pick up public speaking or anything ever again. But eventually I got back
Hmm.
into it through this club called a Gavel Club. Okay, it's basically like Toastmasters but for kids. And
Okay.
yeah, it's like where everybody gives speeches. And over there I used to give some speeches, and that's how I improved my confidence. And through that confidence, I've gained more like insights into how public speaking works and
Okay.
how conversational skills also work by communicating with
Hmm.
each other. Okay, so
Hmm.
that's when I started getting into this domain of talking to more people. And when I started talking to more people, I started enjoying talking to more people, and discovering more about their interests, more about how they they do what they do, right? Like how you are doing podcasting, for example. So I just eventually, like, the more I learn, the more I'm growing, the more like I feel like learning. So that's what actually got me more interested in this podcast arena. And that's my area, my expertise on the communication skills area. And now, coming to the next big thing when it comes to podcasting, choosing a target audience or choosing a niche. So what do you do? What is your target audience, and what is your niche, and how do you decide that this has to be what it is?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty important question for a lot of people. But for me, it was very clear that I don't want to have a niche, because I was not doing this to make money. I was not doing this as a profession. I didn't have any clear goal as well, right? I wanted to do it because I wanted to do it, right? So I didn't want to have any niche because I didn't want to tie myself to the niche. This is very important when you if you're choosing a niche in content, be very careful, because while a lot of people do recommend you to take a niche, to start with a very narrow niche, if you don't have expertise in it, the content will not do well. If you don't like it, the content will not do well. If you get bored of it, the content will not do well. If people don't like it, the content will not do it. So there are a lot of restrictions when it comes to a very narrow niche, right? So be careful of that. You should do it because they are they are more economic benefits, absolutely. But then be aware of the constraints as well. Even this whole idea of start with a niche and eventually will become successful, there is a massive survivorship bias in this. We don't look at all the people who failed at it, right? For the one person that became successful, we backtrack their success and say they started in a niche, but with that person, 9 other people also started with a niche and they didn't become successful. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So there's always like a survivorship bias, right? So yeah, definitely have an audience in mind for sure. I think having an audience in mind is more important than a niche. So you know where to market to, you know who to collaborate with. So have an age group, have a demographic, ideally have a sort of interest set. And most importantly, what I would say about niche and target is, instead of getting overly technical in it, because see, whatever I say, whatever you say, whatever people think, you ask any content creator, any entrepreneur, also any founder, the vision evolves as you grow. So what you start with, it need not be what you continue with. You will always change as you get real time feedback from your own audience, right? When I started like my podcast, I never thought I'll make solo videos, but eventually I got more requests to make solo videos. So I made a lot of solo videos, and that has done so well. In fact, in a way, far better than the podcast as well. So you have to be in a way a little flexible about those things. But what I would say is, if you can, if possible, try to narrow down to the way you want people to feel when they consume your content, because the emotion that you give it's category agnostic. It doesn't depend on who you're talking to. If I want to make my audience feel a certain way, I can make them feel that the same way, whether it's a solo video, whether it's a conversation with you, whether it's a conversation with somebody else, anything. Because it's on my body language, it's on my tonality, it's on my expression, it's on the way I narrate my ideas, right? And if you have consistency in the way you make people feel, every time they want to feel that emotion, they'll come and watch your videos, right? One example is of this, who does this very well, is I think Prakhar Ke Pravachan, right? His videos are very different from each other, but the vibe is the same. So every time someone wants that kind of content, they keep watching his content because of this reason, right? So like technically, I don't think Prakhar has a niche. He doesn't have a niche. He talks about all sorts of things, right? But he has a consistency in terms of how he makes people feel. And whenever anybody wants to feel that, they know they'll only get it from him. So that is one thing I would keep in mind, that try it, if possible, again, if possible, try to narrow down how you want to make your audience feel emotionally. And then what you do can be entirely, it can change, it can start where you want to start, by doing things that you like. It's very difficult to stay consistent with like doing things that you don't like. So start with something that you enjoy doing. Like for me, it was podcasting. But then eventually every process takes its own journey. So yeah.
True. I totally agree. And this is exactly what I had in mind as well. When what you start with is not what you end with. And
Right.
yeah, like I've seen so many other creators who, let's say Joe Rogan. Okay, currently he's doing podcasts, but he started off as a media personality. He started doing television first, and that's how now he's doing podcasts. So like eventually, whatever you start with, you're not probably going to stick to it in like 5-10 years from now. Okay, so another thing that I like what you said was about how you didn't start this for your monetary purposes. For me, it was like I just like talking to people. So in fact, I like talking to people so much. I have so many episodes of physical in person with people, and I'd like to keep it in person more than just doing it over Zoom. But it's just that we have the distance here, right? So the thing is, I like talking to people, and that's why I started it. And I really don't have a niche myself. I'm just I'm just focused on learning. I want to learn about how other people do their things, and I'm interested in the fields that they're talking about, and I'm learning along the way. Learning is my only thing here. That's the biggest reason that I started the podcast. And now coming to the next big thing, which is scripting. Do you script your podcast firstly?
Not at all. I've had a very bad experience with scripting. It doesn't work. It seems like it's going to work, but it doesn't. It makes it boring for you, for the guest, even for the listeners, honestly. So I would not recommend scripting podcasts unless you are doing it um, with a sponsored content. If your brand is sponsoring you or something, then it's a different thing, then you might have to script a little bit. But if it's on your own, I would not recommend scripting it. It's not a good idea. It makes it very interview style. And even if you are doing an interview, there's nothing wrong. Even I've done interview style podcasts, but it's best to leave it unscripted. What you can do, if you have a time constraint, and if the guest is someone who's very very um, he's very busy, so he doesn't give you a lot of time, right? And you need to be overly articulate, and you can't waste time in the middle of the conversation. What you can do is just mark down points that you want to talk about. Don't outline questions, don't narrate anything, don't have a script ready, don't read it from before, don't have it in front of you. Like, all of that doesn't work. It diverts your attention. It takes away from the like your presence, which has to be given to your guest, not to the script. So yeah, in my eyes, I would not recommend scripting. A lot of people feel like if you script your podcast, the actual quality of the conversation improves. See, that might be true, but then you also have to ask yourself that why not just improve your communication skills anyways. Like, you look at Jordan Peterson. I'm just giving an extreme example, but look at the way he speaks, right? He speaks as if he's reading from a script, but he doesn't read from a script. His mind is his own script, right? So why not train yourself? It's possible, right? When I started out, I was not nearly as articulate as I am right now, right? And a lot of people think that my podcasts are also scripted, but they're not. I just think clearly, right? So if you're not, everyone starts somewhere, so you don't start with a strong clarity of thought, but you build your way up there. So if you want to speak with clarity, don't script it, build clarity, right? It takes effort, but that's ultimately because, see, let's say your podcast works out, doesn't work out is a different question, but that skill of clear thinking will translate into any conversation. If this was not a podcast, if we were having a business deal, I'll still think very clearly because my thinking is only clear, right?
True.
So understand that. Don't these hacks, be careful with. That's why I don't like using the word hacks anything, because when you try to hack into something, you might achieve the outcome, you might not achieve the outcome, but you're never improving yourself, which is not a good idea. So I would say, yeah, scripting podcast not recommended.
Right. For me, I initially started with scripting, and what I realized was I was not really, like when the conversation goes on, I don't notice the person. Like I don't notice myself listening to the person. I'm just going according to the script.
Right.
I'm just asking according to the script. I'm not replying with the question like with the answer that they've replied with. Right. So
Correct.
that basically that is an interview style, and I don't want to do it extremely interview style. I do have like most of my podcasts are interview style, but one day I just decided, okay, I'm just gonna ball this, and it turned out very well, and I really liked that episode, and so from then on I've been not scripting the episodes. That is my experience with scripting, and in fact, for anybody listening, this episode is not scripted itself. We just have some pointers. I just had some pointers in mind before, and that's what I'm talking about right now.
Absolutely. No conversation that I'm a part of will ever be scripted. So don't worry about that. I hate scripted conversations. I find them very boring.
The only other time that I do actually script the videos is when the guest wants it. When the guest wants some questions, then I just give the questions to them. So I just keep that in mind, and they also like understand what exactly is going to happen. Right. Now, coming to outreach. So by outreach, I mean, how do you reach out to your guests, and how do you look at finding the guests? Like, which kind of guests are you looking for?
Hmm. I'll answer your second question first, because the first question has already been asked, answered, like documented, made video series on it, which is like, which I call the art of networking, right? So I've already shared like almost everything that I have in that, and I think it's pretty straightforward. So anyone who wants to know can go and watch all those 4 videos. When it comes to choosing guests, yeah, that is interesting. It's important. See, everyone has their own style. I choose guests who I'm interested in, who I want to learn something from for, or who have a story to tell which I want to know more about. So for me, it's pure curiosity. See, if I'm not curious, right? If I'm not curious about the person, I can't frame good questions. I'll frame like extremely generic, like very lousy questions, and I won't enjoy myself. If I don't enjoy myself, you're not going to be enjoying the conversation, and then nobody will enjoy the conversation. So for me, my test is curiosity, right? Of course, if they are famous, if they are successful, if they have a lot of clout for themselves, that is a plus point, because then I know that that will translate into my YouTube channel as well. Having said that, that is not the only criteria. It's just one of the criteria. I've had conversations with people who are not that famous, but they're very interesting according to me. So yeah, either who have a story to tell, either who have some skill that I want to learn from, who've had a journey that I would want for myself, or who are just very interesting people, in general. That's how I choose my guests. It's honestly like very spontaneous, or I don't have this elaborate process. I used to initially, because I had a target list. I still have my target list. A lot of them are over, a lot of them are left. So I start going on that. But most of the most important metric for me is like curiosity. If I'm curious about somebody, then I use my podcast as a way to dig into their mind a little bit.
Mhm. And what platforms do you use for reaching out to people, and what works best for you?
Sta- yeah, standard stuff. Instagram is there, Twitter is there, email is there.
Right, right, right.
I think these three are the best. Eventually, if you can get their number, then of course WhatsApp is there. um, that always works out. The best platform, I said, don't have any kind of attachment to platforms. It's useless, because when you reach out to somebody, you are not important, the other person is important. So you have to see which platform they are receptive of. And a lot of, at least if they are famous, they are very vocal about which platforms they are receptive to, right? For some it's Instagram, for some it's Twitter, for some it's email. So use the platform, play the play the game that the guest is playing, right? And then
Yep.
learn how to play that game better. So the process on
Yep.
Instagram is different from the process on Twitter, and that's different from the process of email. So you have to learn all three processes and use them as the case may be. Having said that, I will say one thing that I don't think I've mentioned in my videos, which is when given a choice of platforms, right? If you feel like you can choose the platform, and your guest is okay with either, use a platform where your how do I put this, your relative importance is high. See, I'll explain what I mean by this, right? If you have above 300 400 followers on Twitter, that's actually pretty good. Most people don't have 80 90, like they hardly have more than 80 90, right? So having 4 500 followers on Twitter is honestly way more valuable than having even, let's say, 1,000 followers on Instagram. So even though your followers are more on Instagram, your relative value is more on Twitter. So if you can DM someone on your Twitter, it might work better for you. If you have, let's say, 60,000 followers on Instagram, but only 200 followers on Twitter, then your relative importance is higher on Instagram,
Yes.
right? And if your professional credentials are very high, let's say you're working with an interesting startup, hypothetically, right? Let's say you're working for a startup like Cred. Let's take the most extreme case. You'll have an email ID with that domain name, maybe, right? There, your relative importance of the email on email is higher because you have a professional email ID, right? So then email might be your best bet. So understand these things and see where your relative importance is higher. And if you start there, it gives you a bit of an advantage.
Right, right, right. I totally agree with that. Yeah. Now, moving on to how you brand yourself. What I've
Hmm.
noticed in your videos is that you've got really good
Hmm.
thumbnails, and like you're just like the way you talk, the way use the hand gestures and stuff. Like it's all nice. I noticed these in your videos, right? And
Okay.
how do you actually like brand yourself? Like, what image are you trying to set to your viewers?
Hmm. Yeah, honestly, I have not figured that question out for myself. So it's a good thing for me to think of. I just speak in the most honest way possible, in the most way that's authentic to me. I figured out very early that the more time you spend planning your video, one is your expectations increase, which is pointless, and second is the quality. You just start thinking in your head too much, right? And then you don't execute well. So what I find really valuable is just like be as spontaneous, be as authentic as possible, be as casual as possible. Edit out things that you don't want to edit out, but make it like, try to do all of them in one take. I do most of my videos in one take, which is why sometimes the editing is not good. And talk in a way that feels natural to you. I normally also use my hands when I talk, so I use my hands even in videos. Like, some people like it, some people don't like it. That's up to them, right? But
Yeah.
I can't change my style like based on that, right? So ultimately, I think with something like podcasting, your communication becomes your brand itself. The way you speak, it also becomes the same thing. But yeah, what I would say is, which I should have also done earlier on, is try to brand your way of speaking. If you can do that, right? It's difficult to do because most people don't know how to speak well, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
But if you get to a point where you think you can speak well, right? Like, I can speak in different I can speak in different tonalities, different speeds, in different ways, right? But that comes only after you've improved your skill. Once you've improved your skill, maybe choose a certain style that works for you. Maybe you can speak a little slowly, like Joe Rogan. He speaks very slowly, or you can speak fast. If you want to speak fast, you can speak fast, right? You can choose your own style, but then stay consistent with that speaking style, so people get used to listening to you.
True.
As a podcaster or as a YouTuber, you want people to get used to listening to you, not necessarily seeing you, because you're not a fashion blogger, right? You're not a visual blogger where your look and all matters. It doesn't matter that much. What matters is your ability to express yourself in language. So if you can stay a little consistent even with the words you use, I've seen a lot of people, their intros are the same, so it anchors to the same feelings. So if you can do these few things, it naturally anchors your brand. But ultimately, I would say, in my experience, at least, again, I'm not very successful, so don't quote me on it, but don't try to maintain a certain image, because then it'll take a form of its own and it'll clash with who you are in real life. And I don't think that's a nice situation to be in the world that we live in today. The offline and online world are becoming seemingly incestuous, and you don't want them to be too much of a difference, that you're on online, you're a completely different person, and offline you're a completely different person. It's bad for your own mental health.
True.
So
True.
I would say, and it is possible, right? You don't have to do that. Yeah, sure, there are some YouTubers, I won't take their names, but who are completely different online and offline. But there are also people who are completely the same, and both have success. So it's not like you have to play that game, right? And as a podcaster, you have an advantage where being authentic is actually an advantage. You're not, just like I said, a visual blogger, right? So use that to your advantage, and as cliche as it sounds, just be yourself.
True. 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 I totally agree. Yeah. And yeah, now let's go on to some negatives that you face as a podcast host. Are there any negative things that you've faced so far with podcasting? Negative
Negatives,
experiences?
yeah, see, of course, like, I mean, if you're reaching out to people on a regular basis, you have to face rejection. That
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
feels a little bad.
Wait.
It does
Wait.
feel
Before
bad, but
that,
eventually you get used to it, and you'll.
let's just talk about your the number of messages that you send on a frequent basis, like on, let's say, every single day. How many messages you send, how many rejections you face, and how many people, how many people have accepted your request for joining your
On a
podcast?
daily basis, I don't
If
know.
you don't
I
know,
don't
sorry,
keep track like that. No, I don't keep
give a
track
rough
like that.
estimate of whatever you did so far, bro. Okay, so Raunak, can you tell me how many people you have actually messaged so far? Give us a rough estimate of how many people have accepted and how many rejected and how many you've messaged so
A
far.
lot of people, bro, a lot of people. It's been a while, so I think at least I would say 60, 70 people in total have definitely reached out to intentionally. Accepted would have been all the guests on the podcast. So I don't know how many that is, but I think around like 30, 35 approximately.
So
Yeah.
I've been doing this for like about 4 to 5 months, and for me, my experience is this. Okay, I've sent out like at least I'd say 200 to 210 messages, and uh, and I've been rejected I've the only people that are accepted are 20, right? This is my 22nd podcast episode. I keep track of every single
Okay.
number, every single episode that comes out. So only 22 accepted among the 200 people that I messaged. So it's like 10%.
Mm.
And that's my rejection rate. And I'm just hoping that it gets really better. Like this is definitely painful, but you just have to deal with this one negative. You just have to get through this phase. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is true. However, what I will say over here
Yeah.
is, first of all, I don't think we should keep track of something like a rejection rate. It's a self-demeaning thing. Like I gave you an answer because you asked me, right? Otherwise, I never track such metrics. Treat people as people, not as numbers. One very big mistake. Having had a few people approach me now to be a guest, which is very recent, I can tell you the clear distinction is, I know when someone's treating me like a number as compared to someone who's treating me like a human being, right? So don't do that. It's not nice. It's not good for the other person, it's not good for your own mental health. And also, if you feel like you're being rejected very often, don't, I wouldn't say just take it in your stride. See, it's easy to tell people to take it in their stride, right? Because it feels like it'll motivate them. But be a little mindful. If you feel like really you're getting rejected, work on yourself a little bit, see where you're going wrong, be critical. See, I'll tell you something else. I think, I don't know whether I've said this before on some other podcast. I feel like I've repeated it earlier, that people don't reject people, people reject interactions, right? So it's not you who was rejected, it's your interaction with that person which was rejected, which was like denied, right? So ask yourself the question that where did you go wrong in the interaction. So don't be self-critical, but be critical about your interaction, because maybe the person who rejected you, maybe they'll anyway reject you, but if you improve your ability to communicate or to reach out to them, you might close somebody else, you might convert somebody else, right? So you have to progressively get better, and you will only, it doesn't happen with time. See, time doesn't improve anything. This is a myth, right? If you consistently do the bad thing, you will consistently get bad results. But if you're critical about the way you're doing things, if you analyze your mistakes well enough, then over time it'll improve. Otherwise, you'll always face a lot of rejection, and then it won't work out for you. So that's what I would say. Be critical about your interactions.
Cool, 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 cool. And yeah, is there any other negative that you face?
Other negative, I mean, I won't call it a negative, but it's definitely a challenge on how do you make like people comfortable, because I literally get 5 minutes with them before we start recording, and I've never met them in my entire life, right? And they have no clue who the hell I am. And I can't even spend too much time introducing myself, because I'm not supposed to do that. I'm the host, right? So it's difficult to make people comfortable, but then it's a very valuable skill also, because now I know I can speak to anybody and get them comfortable, because I know how to make people feel comfortable. So that's
True.
one thing.
Hmm.
Other negatives of a podcast, yeah, there are some technical negatives, which is, the growth rate is not that high. As much as you can see the numbers and all the statistics of podcasts, remember, those are true for the top 1% of podcasts. Most of them don't reach that point, right? So all of the statistics and the numbers are controlled by people like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss, and like stuff like that, right? Most of the average podcasters don't get a big enough piece of the puzzle. So don't rely on that. Growth as a podcaster is slow, even on YouTube, which is why even I ventured like into solo videos. So you will have to swallow that pill at some point of time also, that just conversations are not enough. Then they're not enough for you as a creator, they're not enough for your audience, and they're not enough for growth. So
True.
that's also one negative, that the market is not as good as it seems.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now here's my negative experiences. Okay, initially, you've experienced it in this episode as well. I get these mind blocks. Like I just like forget everything for a second, and then like I'm just
Mm,
lost for the whole minute, and then we have to like reconfigure and get back to the question, right? So this is one big
mm,
negative that I face personally. I
mm,
don't think other podcast hosts do, but I do. And one more is that it's happening again. Uh, another negative is when I don't know how to end a conversation. Okay, like
mm,
I've seen, like it just gets really awkward. I've connected with this person so much for this entire 30 to 45 minutes, and suddenly
mm,
I just have to end it, and I don't know how to end it. So that's where I struggle. Though I figured it out eventually. It's just a simple goodbye.
mm.
Thank you. That's it. So yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah. And now, what are the positives of making a podcast that you faced?
Hmm.
Hmm.
First positive has to be that you're interested in it. So that is always, if that's not a positive for you, then don't be a podcaster, to be frank, right? So you have to enjoy like the process of doing it. As a creator, if I do subscribe to that identity of being a creator, I will say that, if you don't like the process of creating content, don't be a creator, because the harder stuff comes later, right? Which is the distribution of the content, that anyway nobody likes. Most people don't like it, so you're going to have to struggle there. In fact, for me, in how much ever percentage of my time I allocate to creating content. I like the creation aspect. I hate the distribution aspect. I find it very irritating. So if I didn't like the creating aspect of it, then I wouldn't do it, right? So the first positive has to be that you enjoy it. The other more technical things are, yeah, definitely you become far better communicator. You become better at conversations, like I said, by default. If you consistently try to improve, I mean, it's very hard to have 10, 12 podcasts and not improve yourself, right? Because you are editing your podcast, you are uploading them, you have real time feedback. So naturally all of that plays on your mind. And if you edit your own podcast, I always tell people, if you can spare time, try to edit your own podcast. It's okay if you don't edit your videos and all. It's okay if you don't make your thumbnails. Even I don't make my own thumbnails, but edit your podcast so you know where you're getting stuck. You know where you are saying something that's not necessary, saying too much, saying too less, not making the guest feel comfortable. That is where your real feedback comes in. So when you edit your own content, the next time you get better. So 100% your communication skills improves, your conversation skills improves, because of that your social skills improves. So that is one aspect of it. Third, if you play the game of networking well, and there is a very big a capital if in that, if you play it well, then you can build a good network. You get to talk to people who otherwise would never know you existed. So that's 100% there. And the fourth, which is, I would say, the most fluid, not necessarily for podcasts, for any kind of content, is, I think, it in today's day it is important to have a digital identity for yourself. If you are not creating content in some or the other way, and if you're only posting selfies on Instagram, you're not a creator, and you're not creating an identity for yourself in the digital landscape. And over time, if you don't exist, if you don't have a creator persona in the digital landscape, you don't basically exist in the digital world. And that's not a, it's a lost opportunity, right? So it gives an ability for somebody to know something about you. So if somebody wants to meet me for a professional opportunity or for any reason, they can go onto my YouTube channel and they can know a lot about me, right? Because of the content I've created. And if podcasting is your thing, then it's like wearing clothes, right? If I like wearing if I like wearing black clothes, it says something about me. It gives people information about me, that this guy likes wearing black clothes. If you see me always at a party and I'm always dressed in black, if you want to gift me something, you'll probably give me a black thing, right? Because you know I like black. So similarly, if you consistently see me having interesting conversations, you'll know that I'm interested in having interesting conversations. So it builds a digital identity for yourself. In a more millennial term is called personal branding. I don't like that word, honestly. It's used way more than it should, but for lack of a better word, yeah, it's a personal brand as well.
Hmm. So I relate with you so much on all those 4 points that you've covered. And here's an addition. Okay, what other thing that makes me feel good is, the support that people actually give, the comments that you get, the messages
Right.
that you get, the stories that
Yeah.
people put out for you. And it just feels very good. This is engagement basically. And
Correct.
when your video is getting engaged, you just want to put out more. You just want to do it more. You just want to, like, give us. You just enjoy the support, and it just becomes like
Correct.
you just want to play the game further and see what happens.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's really the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining, Raunak. It was an honor to have you. You shared a lot of
Likewise.
knowledge. I've learned a lot, and I'm going to implement some of these ideas into my own podcast now.
Super glad to be here.